Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Brent Venables, the Oklahoma Sooners, kicking off spring practice later in the month of March. And you take a look at this Oklahoma depth chart, and there are a lot of ways that it could shake out heading into the 2024 season. Now, this depth chart in front of us doesn't have the true freshman and transfer portal additions added, so we're going to manually add them as we go. But I want to go through this depth chart and talk about what I think this depth chart looks like heading into that 2024 season, give you guys some of my predictions on position battles that we see play out during spring practice. Really excited to get into this one. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys. A massive shout out to the Oklahoma fans. You guys continue to show a ton of love, a ton of support to the boys. Cannot thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And more importantly, I'm going to give you guys some of my predictions on what this Oklahoma depth chart is going to look like. Would love to hear from you guys as well, and some of your dark horses that are going to get some playing time, maybe even get a starting role heading into 2024. One, I learned a ton from you guys. Secondly, it is a blast talking football with you guys in the comment section. Without further ado, let's get into this one now. Starting quarterback for Oklahoma heading into 2024. This one easy. Jackson Arnold. Now, we did a deep dive and kind of went into some film on Jackson Arnold, talked about what he brings to this Oklahoma offense. And yes, we all know the arm talent that Jackson Arnold has. I think what's so exciting for me is the position that these wide receivers are going to be put in terms of how this offense can thrive with Jackson Arnold. You saw at times this Oklahoma offense, I mean, quite frankly, just limited in terms of the throws that Dillon Gabriel could make on a football field. I think you're going to see a little bit more of an opened up offense for Oklahoma in 2024 when you have a quarterback with the arm strength and the talent that Jackson Arnold has. There is not a throw that he can't make on the football field. And I mean, this is not a shot at Dillon Gabriel, but you couldn't really say the same for Dillon Gabriel. He was really good at what he did, but there were certain throws, especially attacking that deeper third, that Oklahoma didn't really ask Dillon Gabriel to make. And I think Jackson Arnold puts this Oklahoma offense in a really good spot to open it up a little bit more, especially attacking that deeper third. And you talk about who's going to benefit the most. I think it's the wide receiver room. And talking about how I think this wide receiver room shakes out, you're going to see a lot of different names on the field for Oklahoma in 2024. If I were to give you guys my starting three receivers, I think you go Andrel Anthony and a guy like Nick Anderson on the boundary. And I think you have Deion Burks coming in from the transfer from Purdue, playing that slot role. And I think the biggest question mark you have for Oklahoma is who is going to replace Drake Stoops at that slot position. Now, Deion Burks didn't play a ton of slot for Purdue, but a guy that from a skill set standpoint certainly has all the traits that you want in an elite slot wide receiver that can create separation, that can create after the catch. I think Deion Burks is going to come in and kind of provide that value that Drake Stoops kind of had at that slot receiver position in that 2023 year. Now, the boundary receivers, this is where I think it gets interesting. I want to take us back to when Andrel Anthony was healthy. I think he was pretty clearly the wide receiver one in this offense on the boundary. Again, as a Michigan fan, very familiar with Andrel Anthony's game and what does he excel at? He knows how to create separation. He's an extremely polished route runner. We saw that before he went down with an injury. A full health Andrel Anthony, I think, is probably the guy that leads this team in receiving yards. And I mean, on the other side, you have Nick Anderson, who I think is just waiting to break out. And you saw him break out in 2023, but he's only a guy that's going into year 3 of his college football career with all the traits that Nick Anderson has, the physicality at the catch point, the ability to work downfield. That there's one wide receiver that's really going to benefit from Jackson Arnold opening up that deeper third of the field. I think it's going to be Nick Anderson. I think that's a really strong 3 wide receivers that are probably, in my mind, going to get most of the playing time. Then you talk about some guys that are certainly going to play a role, starting with Jaleel Farouk, a guy that, I mean, certainly can be a starting wide receiver for Oklahoma. Maybe not the jump that we all expected during year 3 in 2023, but a guy that you go back to his sophomore year, you saw everything you wanted and truly an elite wide receiver at the college football level. Can Jaleel Farouk get back to that form? Would be massive. for this Oklahoma offense. And you have guys like Jaden Gibson, but I'm going to kind of point to two guys that I think really maybe come on in 2024, especially with Jackson Arnold as your quarterback. And those are the burners, right? Brennan Thompson, Jaquez Petaway, two, again, young guys that are only going into year 3 and year 2 respectively. You didn't see Oklahoma really attack downfield that often. You have two wide receivers in Petaway and Brennan Thompson, who are some of the fastest wide receivers that you'll see across the country. Can they get more involved, hitting those explosive plays downfield, using that vertical speed? That's a massive storyline for Oklahoma fans to kind of tune into heading into 2024. Now, in the running back room, I think we have a good feel for who is going to be the lead back, and that is Gavin Sawchuk. When Gavin Sawchuk was healthy last year, he was absolutely phenomenal. And he checks off the boxes of everything that you want in a running back in this Oklahoma offense, a guy that can be physical between the tackles, but I think is really special when he gets to the second level. And Oklahoma's been really good. I think Seth Littrell is going to pick up right where Jeff Levy kind of ended off in terms of getting these running backs to the second level in space and letting them excel. Now, I think the real question is who is going to be that running back to Javante Barnes. If he's healthy, certainly going to be in the mix. I'm going to go with true freshman Taylor Tatum. And I think Taylor Tatum is exciting for multiple different reasons. One, phenomenal running back. There's a reason that he's one of the top running backs in the country coming out of high school. He's also an elite pass catcher. And again, that's not necessarily talked a lot about ads at that running back spot. You saw Taylor Tatum line up in the slot at the high school level and run really clean routes. I think he can provide a lot of juice out of the backfield as a pass catcher. If you're asking me for some of the true freshmen that can come in right away and really get some playing time, I think Taylor Tatum at the running back spot certainly has a chance. I'll go Gavin Sawchuk 1, Taylor Tatum 2, Javante Barnes number 3. Now, getting to the offensive line, and I think this is probably the most interesting conversation for Oklahoma fans. And if there is a concern for Oklahoma fans, at least in my mind, heading into 2024, it's probably on the offensive line. Now, I want to start with the tackle position, where I think Jacob Sexton is a really, really talented tackle that I think we've seen him show what he can do. I don't think we've seen him put it on a consistent basis. If he does that, I think you have a really solid left tackle in Jacob Sexton. Now, I think the question is at that right tackle spot, you bring in Spencer Brown from Michigan State, you bring in Michael Tarkin from USC. Who's going to win that out? And I'm going to go Spencer Brown. This is a guy that has a lot of experience at the Big Ten level playing right tackle. But I'll say this. If you can get Michael Tarquin back from that Florida film in 2022, where I thought he was playing at a very high level in the SEC, you might have one with Michael Tarquin as well. And I think Brent Venables did a really good job bringing in two tackles that have a lot of experience, have a lot of starting experience at the Power 5 level. That's some nice competition for Oklahoma at the tackle spot heading into the 2024 season. Now, on the inside, I think Troy Everett is a lock to start at center. He is one of my favorite offensive linemen on this Oklahoma roster. I think Fabichi Nuaru, coming from North Texas, is going to hold down one of those guard spots. And I'm going to go ahead and call my shot and go with true freshman Eugene Brooks. We saw it with Caden Green last year. Eugene Brooks, you talk about a guy that I think, one, is physically ready to step on a football field in the SEC and play as a true freshman. Eugene Brooks, certainly that guy. But more importantly, I think he's a guy that is extremely polished as well. Going back and watching some of that Under Armour All-American film, going back and watching his senior year, this is a guy that I think is not only physically ready, but developmentally ready as well to play early. I got Eugene Brooks holding down one of those starting guard positions. Now, at the tight end spot, I think it's really interesting. You have a guy like Jake Roberts, who probably gives you the highest floor at that tight end room. But you have Devon Mitchell. You have a guy in Bauer Sharp who's a freak athlete coming from a lower level in the FCS. That's kind of an interesting tight end room. I'm not necessarily, I'm going to go with Jake Roberts right now, but I wouldn't be surprised if Bauer Sharp or Devon Mitchell really put it together and become that starter in that tight end room. Going to the defensive side of the football, this is where I think it really gets exciting during spring practice, because you got a lot of different position battles. Now, starting on the inside, I think you got DeJoun Terry and Jacob Lacey. DeJoun Terry played phenomenal football for Oklahoma in 2023. That was a massive, massive get back for Oklahoma heading into 2024. Now, what does the depth look like? I mean, you have guys like Jaden Jackson, like David Stone, and those are two guys that we said David Stone, probably the most talented off defensive lineman, maybe outside of PJ Adebawore on that defensive line. And then you have a guy like Jaden Jackson, who kind of similar conversation to Eugene Brooks, I think is just physically ready to be a player at the SEC level as a true freshman. If those true freshmen and David Stone, Jaden Jackson can give you some value in that two deep, massive news for the Oklahoma Sooners. Now, at the edge rusher position, I think Ethan Downs is on one side, and I think the other side is going to be really interesting. And I'm going to call my shot again and say PJ Adebawore puts it together year two and kind of takes over that starting role. This is a guy that we kind of knew coming out of high school would probably take a year, and quite frankly, thought he looked better than expected during year one for the Oklahoma Sooners. I think PJ Adebawore is going to be another starting edge rusher. So you got Ethan Downs, PJ Adebawore, but then you have R. Mason Thomas. You have a couple other guys, Caden Willard, coming in the transfer portal, that you talk about competition at that pass rusher position. You talk about depth. You talk about keeping guys fresh. You see in Brent Venables put a strong emphasis on depth and talent on that defensive line in the transfer portal, on the recruiting trail. I think we see it pay off for Oklahoma in 2024. Heading to the linebacker room, you got to lock the start with Danny Stutzman. You all know he's one of my favorite linebackers in college football. I think the other question is who gets that starting spot at the other linebacker spot. Now, Jaron Kanak, I think, probably didn't progress like many of us expected in 2023. I'm going to go ahead and give Kip Lewis the nod at that linebacker spot. You'll probably see a rotation. I think Kobe McKenzie, certainly a guy that can play as well. But if you're asking me, your day one starters for Oklahoma at that linebacker spot, Danny Stutzman, Kip Lewis at your linebacker spot. And going to the back end, this is where I think it gets extremely interesting for Oklahoma in the back end. Now, your boundary cornerbacks, Gentry Williams, Woody Washington, I think you feel pretty good about those two guys, but there are going to be some competition from some young guys as well. Makari Vickers, one of my favorite prospects in that 2023 class. I thought Connie Walker played some really good football. Gentry Williams and Woody Washington, they enter spring practice as your starting quarterbacks, but there's going to be some heated competition at that boundary cornerback spot. Now, at the safety role, I think Billy Bowman and Peyton Bowen are probably locks to play safety. I really would like to see Peyton Bowen play more in year two. This is a guy that physically absolutely ready, but I thought you saw the instincts as well. But I'm kind of interested to see how this shakes out with Zach Alley. I don't know if you'll see the traditional cheetah role that we saw last year. Zach Alley likes to play with a lot of three safeties as opposed to a nickel. And I'm kind of interested to see how that cheetah position looks under Zach Alley in 2024. Justin Harrington just getting approved for another year of eligibility. He was playing some really good football before he went down with the injury. Probably going to be my pick to get that starting spot. But you have guys like Robert Spear-Jennings that I think certainly can play at a high level. Kendall Doby, another guy, Deshaun McCullough. You got a lot of different personnel, a lot of guys that can do different things. If you're asking me your five starters in the back end, I got Woody Washington and Gentry Williams at the boundary with a lot of competition coming through. Billy Bowman and Peyton Bowen in the back end at your safeties. And I'll go with Justin Harrington at that cheetah position. But again, very interested to see what that cheetah position looks like under Zach Alley. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys. Would love for some corrections. Would love for some names that I might be sleeping on. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.